My name is Raymond Ray Hollis, and I'm telling you right now, I never thought I'd live long enough to be laughed at like a stray dog in front of a room full of suits, and then walk away holding the one thing that would bring my wife's whole new empire to its knees. The marble hallway of the Peoria County Courthouse was cold enough to bite through my coat. The air smelled like wet wool and old paper. Somewhere behind me, a metal detector beeped, and a bailiff said, "Next," like he'd said it 1,000 times already this morning. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, feeling my own pulse in my fingertips. Across the hall, my wife's soon-to-be ex-wife, Diane Hollis, was trying to hold her face together. 48 years old, beautiful in that sharp, polished way. Hair pinned back like she was about to argue in front of the Supreme Court instead of a county hearing room in Peoria, Illinois. Her heels clicked against the floor, fast, nervous. She kept glancing down at the folder clutched to her chest like it might save her if she squeezed hard enough. When her eyes landed on me, her mouth opened just a little and she froze. Not because she missed me, because she knew why I was there. The woman sitting beside her, some younger attorney with a high ponytail and a lawyer's smile, leaned in to whisper something, but Diane didn't hear it. Her gaze stayed locked on mine, like I was a storm she'd pretended wasn't coming. A reporter stood near the wall with a notepad. Two local attorneys hovered like vultures who'd smelled blood. A woman I recognized from church tightened her scarf and stared at the floor. Then the door to hearing room B swung open, and the clerk called out in a flat voice, "Matter of Hollis and Hollis and related trust account inquiry." Trust account inquiry. Those words landed like a shovel of dirt on a coffin. Diane's lips turned pale. Her hand trembled as she shifted that folder. She looked back again right at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something raw in her eyes. Fear. Not the kind you can pose for on a stage. The kind that shows up when applause stops and the truth starts talking. And as she stepped forward, I remembered the exact moment she decided I was a joke. It wasn't here. It was the night she opened her law firm, her dream, and used me like a prop. That's the part you need to understand. Because I didn't come to that courthouse to scream. I didn't come to beg. I didn't come to win her back. I came because she handed me an envelope in front of everyone, smiled like a queen, and told me the first job of her brand new law firm was divorcing me. So I signed. And I left. And I let the paper do what paper does. The truth is that night started like any other Midwestern big deal event, overpriced appetizers, too much cologne, and people pretending they weren't checking each other's watches. It was late October, the kind of Illinois evening where the wind has teeth, but folks still refuse to wear gloves because winter hasn't officially arrived. I parked my Ford F-150 3 blocks away because Diane had insisted the riverfront lot would be for clients and press. Like we were celebrities. I stood in front of the event hall for a second, smoothing my suit coat the way my dad used to before church. Navy blazer, white shirt tie I'd owned since my niece's wedding. It still fit. I took care of my things. In my left hand was a small gift bag, nothing fancy. A leather portfolio, the kind you buy from a real store, not online. I thought she'd like it. Diane loved anything that looked expensive. "Proud of you," I'd planned to say. Something simple, something steady, because that's who I am. I'm 56 years old, born and raised outside Galesburg, spent 30 years in commercial lending and private financing. I'm not flashy, but I know numbers, I know contracts, and I know how to keep a roof over a family's head. And for 17 years, that family was Diane. I walked inside and the warmth hit my face, spiced candles, fried little bacon-wrapped things, and someone's perfume so strong it made my eyes sting. The room was full. Men in suits, women in dresses, laughter floating up toward the ceiling. At first I felt that swell of pride. Then I saw the pointing. It was subtle at first. A head tilt, a hand covering a mouth, a quick glance at me, and then away like I'd walked in with toilet paper stuck to my shoe. I stepped farther in, scanning for Diane. And that's when I heard it. A man's voice, loud enough that he didn't care who heard, said, "Well, look at that. The loser husband is here." The word loser cracked through the room like a dropped plate. More laughter followed, tight, mean laughter. My chest went hot, my ears rang. I stood there holding that gift bag like an idiot watching people. I recognized people Diane had introduced me to as friends smirk like I was entertainment. Then Diane turned. She saw me and her smile widened like she'd been waiting for this moment. She walked straight toward me, heels clicking on the polished floor, and held out a thick white envelope. Ray, she said, sweet as iced tea. Let's be adults. I stared at the envelope. My name was typed on the front. What's this? I asked, even though my gut already knew. She leaned closer, just enough that only I could hear her, and she said, the first job of my firm is our divorce. I don't remember the drive home. I know that sounds strange, but it's the truth. I remember stopping at a red light on Adams Street. I remember the radio talking about corn prices and a high school football score. I remember my hands on the steering wheel, knuckles pale like they belonged to someone else. But I don't remember how I got there. What I remember is the sound my front door made when I closed it behind me. A soft, familiar click. The sound of a house that still thought it had a married man living inside it. I stood in the entryway for a long moment without turning on the lights. The house smelled like old wood coffee grounds and the lemon cleaner Diane used, even though it always made my eyes itch. My jacket slid off my shoulders and landed on the chair by the door. Same chair it had landed on for years. Nothing was broken, nothing was on fire. And yet everything felt unhooked. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water from the tap. The pipes groaned the way they always had, like an old man clearing his throat. I took a sip, then another. My hands were steady now, which surprised me. I sat at the table where we'd eaten dinner 1,000 times, me, at the end, Diane across from me, talking about cases she hoped to get someday. Back when this law firm was just a dream and a stack of textbooks. That's when the memories started pushing in. Not the good ones, the practical ones. I remembered the first time Diane talked about law school seriously. She was 41. Most people we knew thought it was a phase. I didn't. I believed in work. I believed in second acts. I'll handle the money, I told her. You handle the work. And I did. I paid the application fees, the bar prep courses, the rent when she cut back her hours to study. I co-signed on the student loans because her credit was thin and mine was clean as a whistle. When she failed the bar the first time, she cried in this very kitchen, head on my shoulder. I remember rubbing her back and saying, it's just paper, Di. You're still you. Funny how paper works. I stood up and opened the file drawer in the hallway, the one Diane never touched. Inside were folders neatly labeled in my handwriting. Taxes, insurance, investments. And there it was. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there holding the folder, feeling the weight of it. Not heavy in pounds, heavy in meaning. I'd always handled the numbers quietly. Diane liked the spotlight. I liked the ledger. It worked for a long time. I flipped the folder open. Office lease, equipment financing, business credit line, malpractice insurance, startup capital agreement, and my signature. Not once, over and over again. Personal guarantees. That was the phrase that kept coming back to me. Personal guarantees. I sat back down and let out a slow breath. My heart wasn't racing. That scared me more than if it had been. My phone buzzed on the table. Diane. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, then again. I turned the phone face down and stared at the grain of the wood in the table. There was a small burn mark near the edge from the time I'd set a hot pan down too fast. Diane had yelled. I'd shrugged. Adds character, I'd said. 17 years of character. I thought about calling someone. My brother, a friend. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd known by heart for 20 years. Sefcu, this is Marla, came the voice on the other end. Steady, familiar. Marla, I said, it's Ray Hollis. Well, I'll be, she said. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything all right? I hesitated, just a half second. No, I said, but it will be. There was a pause, then she said, all right, what do you need? I explained the situation plainly. No drama, no insults, just facts, divorce papers, business ties, my name on guarantees. Marla listened without interrupting. When I finished, she cleared her throat. Ray, you're not trapped, she said. You never were. Some of these guarantees can be withdrawn going forward. Others, well, those depend on timing and notice. Am I breaking the law? I asked. No, she said. You're exercising your rights. That sentence settled something in my chest. We went through it line by line. What could be stopped? What had to be unwound carefully? What required written notice? When we hung up, it was nearly midnight. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling fan. It made a soft ticking sound as it slowed like a clock winding down. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. Ray, Diane said, her voice light controlled. This doesn't have to be ugly. Just sign quietly. Don't embarrass me. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't embarrass me. I laughed then. Not loud, just a short breath that came out wrong. I went into the living room and sat in my old leather chair. The one Diane said we should replace because it looked dated. It creaked when I leaned back, warm and familiar. I looked around the room at the framed photos, the bookshelf, the lamp with the crooked shade. I realized something in that moment. She thought I would fight her with emotion. She had no idea I'd answer with paper. Morning came in thin and gray, like it wasn't sure it wanted to show up. I woke before the alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening to the furnace kick on and off. The house felt bigger without Diane's breathing beside me. Not lonelier, just hollow like an auditorium after everyone's gone home. I made coffee the old way. Scoop, pour, wait. The machine hissed and sputtered, filling the kitchen with that bitter, comforting smell. I stood there in my socks, watching steam curl up toward the cabinets we'd picked out together years ago. Diane had wanted white. I'd argued for wood. Wood lasts longer. I sat at the table with my mug and opened my laptop. This wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, not the kind people imagine. It was inventory. I opened the folder labeled Hollis Legal again this time, with a pen beside me. I read slowly. Dates, clauses, notice periods. My own name jumped off the page in clean black ink, steady and deliberate, like the man who'd signed it. Personal guarantee equipment lease. Personal guarantee business line of credit. Personal guarantee copier and IT services. I exhaled and rolled my shoulders. All right, Ray, one thing at a time. The first call was to the leasing company. A polite young man answered chipper like he hadn't learned yet that business conversations could ruin someone's day. I'm calling regarding account 4478, I said. My name is Raymond Hollis. Click of keys. Yes, sir. How can I help you today? I'm withdrawing from any future personal guarantees associated with this lease, I said evenly. Per section 9, subsection C. Written notice will follow. There was a pause, not long, just enough. Yes, sir, he said. I'll note that. I hung up and stared at the screen for a moment, waiting for something to hit me. Guilt, fear, relief. Nothing came. Next was the copier service, then the IT contract. Each call felt the same. Calm, professional. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't threatening. I was stepping back inch by inch, exactly the way the contracts allowed. The mouse clicked. An email confirmation popped up. Then another. Each one felt like a paper cut. Small, clean, precise. Around 10, my phone buzzed again. Diane. I let it ring. Then another call, then a text. Ray, what are you doing? I set the phone face down and took a sip of coffee that had gone cold. By noon, I'd sent formal notices where needed and scheduled follow-ups where things required time. Not everything could be undone in a day. That was fine. I wasn't in a hurry. I shut the laptop and rubbed my eyes. That's when the doubt crept in. I stood up and paced the living room, hands on my hips. The leather chair creaked behind me. Was I going too far? I thought about Diane at 41, sitting at this same table with a stack of law books, hair pulled back, eyes bright with hope. I thought about the way she'd squeezed my hand when she passed the bar the second time. I picked up my phone and scrolled to her name. Then I set it back down. This wasn't about punishing her. This was about stopping myself from being dragged into something I didn't agree to anymore. Around 1, I drove to the VFW. VFW Post 51 sat on a quiet corner, squat and unremarkable. American flag out front, flapping in the wind like it had somewhere to be. Inside, it smelled like bacon grease and old coffee. Familiar. Honest. Walt Mercer was already there, nursing his second cup and reading the paper like it was his job. Hell of a morning for it, he said without looking up. Morning for what, I asked, pulling out a chair. Whatever you're dealing with, he said, finally glancing up at me. You look like a man reorganizing his life. I snorted. That obvious. He shrugged. 17 years married, then suddenly you're here on a Tuesday. I told him, not everything, just enough. He listened, nodding slowly, jaw tight. She did that in public, he said when I finished. I nodded. Walt took a long sip of coffee. That's not business, that's theater. I'm not trying to burn her down, I said. Good, he said. Because that's how villains talk. You're not burning anything. You're stepping out of the blast radius. I stared into my cup. People are going to think I'm the bad guy. They already do, Walt said. Might as well be a bad guy who sleeps at night. We sat in silence for a minute. Somewhere in the back, someone laughed at a TV. As I stood to leave, I heard two men at the next table talking low. She told them bonuses by Christmas, one said. Second office by spring, the other replied. River North or something. My stomach tightened. I walked out into the cold, that conversation echoing in my head. Bonuses, expansion, promises? Back in my truck, my phone buzzed again. Voicemail. Diane's voice was sharper now, the sweetness gone. Ray, this is getting serious. You're messing with people's livelihoods. Call me back, now. I drove home slow, thinking about promises made on money that wasn't hers alone. That evening, a text came from my lawyer. She filed an emergency motion. Expect service. I set the phone down on the counter and leaned back against it, staring out the window at the bare trees. So that was it. She wasn't going to talk. She was going to push. And for the first time since that night at the party, my hands started to shake. The knock came just after dark. Not a polite tap, not a neighborly rap, a sharp, impatient knock that rattled the glass like it expected obedience. I was standing at the sink, rinsing out my coffee mug when it happened. Outside, the wind howled down the street, dragging dead leaves across the pavement. The porch light flickered once, twice. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Diane stood there in a coat too thin for October, hair pulled back. Tight cheeks flushed from the cold, and something else, anger, maybe fear. Her heels clicked on the concrete like punctuation marks. Can I come in, she asked. It wasn't really a question. I stepped aside. You're already here. She brushed past me, bringing a gust of cold air and expensive perfume into the house. She looked around like she was inspecting a stranger's living room, not the place she'd slept in for years. You're freezing my accounts, she said, turning on me. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I'm unfreezing myself, I said. There's a difference. She laughed, sharp and short. Don't play dumb, Ray. You're pulling guarantees. You're canceling payments. You're trying to ruin me. I closed the door and leaned against it. The house creaked softly, settling. You handed me divorce papers in front of a room full of people, I said. You called it professional. That was business, she snapped. So is this. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to decide what's business. You've always hidden behind numbers because you're afraid of the real world. I felt that one land, not hard but deep. I spent 30 years in the real world, I said quietly. Keeping lights on, keeping promises. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think the judge is going to like this? You think the court won't see what you're doing? I can make this very uncomfortable for you. There it was. The threat dressed up as concern. I met her gaze. You wanted professional, I said. This is me treating you like any other partner who changed the terms without warning. She scoffed. Don't pretend this is clean. People are already talking. I know, I said. That gave her pause. They think you controlled everything, she went on. They think I was trapped. I gestured around the room. Does this look like control? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. You're going to cost me my firm, she said finally, her voice cracking just a little. I felt something twist in my chest, not regret, recognition. I didn't build your firm, I said. I supported it. There's a difference. Her eyes flashed. You always have to be right. No, I said. I just read the fine print. She stood there breathing hard, then turned and stormed toward the door. Enjoy your little victory, she said over her shoulder. This isn't over. When she left, the house felt colder. The next few days blurred together. Friends stopped calling. A couple we used to have dinner with canceled for now. A man I'd known from church nodded at me and then looked away. I ate alone. I slept in the middle of the bed. I started leaving the TV on at night just to hear another voice in the room. Then the call came. Mr. Hollis, a man said. This is Hank Rourke. I knew the name. Local contractor, solid reputation. I hired your wife's firm, he said. I hope that's all right. It's fine, I said. What's going on? There was a long pause. Something doesn't feel right, he said. About the billing. About where my retainer went. My stomach tightened. I don't want trouble, he said quickly. But I don't want to be the next guy who gets hurt either. Send me what you have, I said. That night I opened his email. Invoices, dates, one line stopped me cold. Trust account transfer pending. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This wasn't about me anymore. It never had been. I didn't sleep much that night. That old leather chair creaked every time I shifted, and the house made its usual sounds, pipes ticking the furnace, sighing, but none of it settled me. Hank Rourke's email sat open on my laptop, glowing like an accusation I hadn't asked for. Trust account transfer pending. I wasn't a lawyer. I didn't need to be one to know what that meant. Client money wasn't supposed to wander. It was supposed to sit still, quiet, accounted for. I poured myself another cup of coffee at 2 a.m. and read the invoices again. Dates lined up in a way that made my jaw tighten. A retainer paid, a promise made, a transfer marked temporary. Temporary had a funny way of becoming permanent when no one was watching. By dawn, the decision wasn't dramatic, it wasn't brave, it was inevitable. I showered, shaved, and put on a clean shirt like I was going to work. Old habit. The mirror showed a man who looked tired but clear-eyed. That was new. I sat at the kitchen table and opened a browser tab. Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. Plain website. No drama, just instructions. I hesitated with my finger over the mouse. This wasn't pulling a guarantee. This wasn't canceling a payment. This was something that could end a career. I thought about Diane at 41, shaking in this kitchen after failing the bar. I thought about her smile when she finally passed. I thought about the applause at her opening night, how loud it had been when I walked out. Then I thought about Hank, about whoever came after him. I clicked. I didn't write an essay. I didn't write accusations. I attached documents. I listed dates. I typed one sentence. These materials are submitted for review. Please verify independently. I hit send. The room felt quieter afterward. Later that morning, I drove to the church. Not because I'm especially holy, because the basement was always empty on weekdays and I needed somewhere to sit that wasn't my house. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. Folding chairs lined the wall. A coffee urn sat cold on a table with a handwritten sign that said, "Help yourself." I sat alone and stared at my hands. I didn't set out to hurt her. I said to no one in particular. I just stopped helping. Saying it out loud didn't make it easier. It made it truer. A week later, Diane announced a free legal seminar. Community outreach. Image repair. I saw the flyer taped up at the grocery store and again on the church bulletin board. Protecting your business. What you need to know. Her picture was on it. Confident, smiling. The same smile she'd worn when she handed me that envelope. I didn't plan to go. I showed up anyway. The church hall was full local shop owners, a few retirees, some curious faces. Diane stood near the podium, flipping through her notes. For the first time, she looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. I took a seat in the back. A volunteer stepped up to the microphone and beamed. Before we begin, I just want to thank everyone who made tonight possible, especially Diane's husband, Ray, her biggest supporter. Without him, none of this would be possible. A ripple of awkward laughter moved through the room. I nodded once and kept my eyes forward. Diane's face flickered, just for a second. Then she recovered. She launched into her talk, smooth practice, confident, talking about trust, transparency, doing things the right way. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Mr. Hollis, a woman said. Her voice was neutral, careful. This is regarding a scheduled hearing at the Peoria County Courthouse, 9 a.m. Friday. I leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Understood, I said. When I walked back into the hall, Diane was still talking, still smiling. She hadn't seen the ground shift yet. Friday morning broke clean and cold. The kind of Illinois cold that feels honest, no drama, just truth in the air. I parked 2 blocks from the Peoria County Courthouse and walked the rest of the way, hands buried in my coat pockets. The sky was pale, almost white, and the flag out front snapped hard in the wind. My breath fogged in front of me, steady and slow. Inside the courthouse smelled like polished floors and old paper. Shoes echoed, voices stayed low. This wasn't a place for speeches, it was a place for records. I sat on a wooden bench outside Hearing Room B, watching people pass. Lawyers in dark suits, a man with a briefcase too worn to be fashionable, a woman whispering into her phone like she was afraid the walls might listen. Diane arrived 10 minutes later. She looked immaculate, navy suit, hair pinned back, makeup just enough to suggest confidence without vanity. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was heading into a normal day at work. Her eyes found me almost immediately. They didn't soften this time. They searched. She took a seat across the hall, folders stacked neatly in her lap. A younger attorney sat beside her, whispering quickly. Diane nodded, jaw tight. When the clerk opened the door and called the matter, the hallway went quiet in that particular way public places do when something serious is about to happen. Inside the room was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, a seal mounted behind the bench, a handful of chairs filled with observers, local attorneys. One reporter I recognized, a man I later realized was Hank Rourke. Diane took her place at the table. I sat in the back. The hearing started the way these things always do, slow, careful, methodical. Names read into the record, statements of purpose, no accusations yet, just groundwork. Then the questions began. Ms. Hollis, the official, said, calm as a librarian. Can you explain the handling of client trust funds referenced in these documents? Diane smiled, professional, polished. Of course, she said. There appears to be a misunderstanding. She explained, carefully, confidently. She used words like temporary and administrative delay in standard practice. I watched her hands. They trembled when she turned a page. The official nodded, taking notes. Asked another question, then another. Each one narrower than the last. Dates were read aloud, amounts, account numbers. The room grew very quiet. Diane's answers started to shift just slightly. A word changed here, a phrase there. Nothing dramatic, but enough. Enough for the people who knew how to listen. Then something happened I hadn't planned for. One of Diane's staff members, a young woman I'd seen at the opening party, stood up. May I speak? She asked. The official looked surprised but nodded. She swallowed hard. We were told bonuses were coming, she said, that funds had been moved temporarily. I asked about payroll last week and was told not to worry. Diane turned, eyes wide. You don't understand. The official raised a hand. Ms. Hollis, please. The young woman sat down, face flushed, hands shaking. That was it. No shouting, no accusations hurled across the room. Just the quiet sound of certainty settling in. The official spoke again, voice even. Given the inconsistencies presented today, the court is ordering an immediate review and temporary restrictions pending further investigation. Diane's shoulders sagged. She turned and looked back at me. For a second, we locked eyes. I didn't smile, I didn't nod, I didn't look away. I saw it then, not anger, not hatred. Understanding. She finally saw what she'd done. When the hearing adjourned, people stood slowly like they were afraid to make noise. The reporter scribbled notes. Hank caught my eye and gave a small, grateful nod. I stood and made my way toward the door. That's when a man in a gray uniform stepped into my path. Mr. Hollis, he asked. Yes. You've been served. He handed me an envelope. I took it, thanked him, and walked outside into the cold. The sky was brighter now. Clear. I didn't open the envelope right away. I sat in my truck for a long moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching people come and go from the courthouse steps. Lawyers talking in low voices, a couple arguing softly near the curb. Life moving forward like it always does, even when something inside you has finally stopped. When I did open it, it was exactly what I expected. More motions, more paper, more attempts to pull me back into a fight I no longer wanted. I folded it neatly and slid it into the glove compartment. That evening, the house felt different. Not quiet in a lonely way, quiet in a settled way, like dust after a storm. I made myself a simple dinner, eggs, toast, nothing fancy, and ate at the table without turning on the TV. Outside, the wind had died down. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then stopped. I was rinsing my plate when the knock came. This one was softer. I knew who it was anyway. Diane stood on the porch with her arms crossed, coat wrinkled, hair loose around her face like she'd stopped caring halfway through the day. No makeup, no performance, just a woman who'd finally run out of applause. I won't stay long, she said. That's fine, I replied, stepping aside. She didn't walk past me this time. She hovered near the doorway, eyes moving over the familiar room like she was seeing it for the first time. I didn't think it would go like that, she said quietly. I know, I said. She swallowed. I got carried away. The firm, the image, everyone expecting me to be more. I leaned against the wall. Peoria isn't small, Diane. It just remembers things. She let out a shaky breath. Why didn't you warn me? I met her eyes, I did. You just couldn't hear it over the applause. She looked down then, really looked. Her shoulders slumped. I thought you were trying to destroy me, she said. I wasn't, I said. I stopped holding everything up. There was a long silence between us. I found the account, she said finally, the savings one. I nodded. You didn't have to, she said. I know, I replied, but I wasn't trying to leave you with nothing. I just couldn't keep feeding the lie. Tears slid down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. I don't hate you, she said. I don't hate you either, I said, and that was the truth. She stepped back onto the porch, the cold air rushing in between us one last time. Take care of yourself, Ray, she said. You too, I replied. When the door closed, I didn't lock it right away. I stood there listening to the house breathe. In the weeks that followed, things settled. The divorce moved forward quietly. No shouting, no public scenes, just signatures and schedules. I started going back to the VFW on Saturdays. Walt saved me a seat without saying a word. I volunteered to help a younger guy figure out his first investment. I took morning walks when the frost was still on the grass. Life didn't get louder. It got clearer. I learned something through all of this, something it took me 56 years to understand. Strength doesn't raise its voice. It reads the fine print. It knows when to step back, and it trusts that the truth given time will always show up exactly where it's needed. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or laughed at, remember this dignity doesn't need revenge. It needs patience. And if this story gave you something to think about, share it with someone who might need that reminder. And if you want to hear more real stories like this one, consider subscribing and staying a while. Some lessons are worth passing on.